Okay, let's get into some Sententiae from Chapter 10 of Wheelock's Latin. The first one is relatively simple, but if you rush it, you might get mixed up. So let's look at it carefully. Of course, you should look at all the Sententiae carefully. In fact, you should always read it carefully in English too, unless it's People magazine or whatever. But if you get nothing else from Latin, paying attention to each word should be it, because each word in Latin is a special flower with its own character. Anyway, the verb, fugite, fugire, to flee, or to shun, perhaps. There are a couple of different definitions we could go with here. And of course, this here is an imperative. Is it a singular or a plural imperative? How many people are being commanded here? Well, in this case, it's plural. So what Cicero is commanding us to do here is to shun. Let's go with shun, actually, because we have a direct object here. If we go with flee, we'd want to say flee from, which is fine, too. We can do that. But let's go with shun. And caputitatem, maybe we can translate that as the passion. Now, in English, we'd probably express these as datives, as in the passion for money and glory. But here it's in Latin. I'm pretty sure these are actually genitive. But, of course, the forms are identical, so it can be tricky to say, but they're genitive. So we might say something still in English. We want to translate it in good English. So we'll say shun the passion for money, and then que and glory. Okay, let's skip down to number 6. This is from Lucretius, who probably, along with Apuleius, is one of my favorite ancient authors. He wrote a book called De Rerum Natura, on the nature of things, in which he expounds on his Epicurean philosophy, which is a materialistic philosophy. Well, I shouldn't say materialistic, but materialist. So before the comma, we have a verb, duces, and this is third conjugation, dun dun dun. So we have to decide, is this present or future? Because it's not as obvious as in the first and second conjugations. Well, the present would be duces. So this must be future, duces. Then the S tells us that this is a you subject, that is second person singular. So if you will lead me, Musa. Have you ever heard of the Muses? The Muses are the 9 divinities of art and science. There's the muse of poetry, astronomy, mathematics, and so forth. They inspire artists. So this is a prayer to a muse. So what case is Musa in? It looks nominative, but of course this is evocative. So if you will lead me, and let's throw that O muse. Let's just throw that O in there to be fancy and classical. Then we have the verb capiam. And we have to decide, this is fourth declension, so is it future, present, or imperfect? Well, this is that funny looking first person singular future. So we want to say, I will take. Well, take what? We need an accusative. Here it is. He's going to take Corona, California. No, of course not. He's going to take the crown. And this next phrase should be clear to all of us. Magna cum laude, with great praise. Okay, let's do number 7 too. There's really only one trick to this sentence that might trip you up. What might be tricky for a speaker of English is that we have an adjective here, but no noun to go with it. And it's not a substantive adjective. In fact, I suppose it would be a predicate adjective. But first, let's go to the verb, vive. This is clearly from one of our new vocab entries. Vivere, to live. And what's the form? Well, it's imperative. Is it one or many people being addressed here? Well, it's singular, of course. So even though in English we wouldn't include the you, I think it would be a good idea to write to here. So tu, vive, you live. That will help us to think of what to do with memor. So what case, gender, and number is memor? Well, Wheelock tells us, fortunately. Nominative, masculine, and singular. So what noun is paired with it? Well, nothing that's explicit in the sentence, but it's actually this implied to. They go together. So you live mindful. And of course we can just cross that out because we wouldn't even have it in English either. Mindful of what? Well, here's a third declension genitive. Mortis, from mos. Live mindful of death. The hour flies. We could also say time flies, but we'll just be as literal as we want to be here. The hour flies. Okay, number 9. This one isn't terribly difficult, but I thought I'd include it here because it highlights such a difference between our own times and pre-modern times. The verb? Well, it's fourth declension. And as always, we have to ask, is this present or future? Well, future would be veniunt. So this is present. This is clearly third person plural, so we're looking for a they subject. And hey, here's a plural adjective. Must be a substantive adjective. Few. Few men or people. Few men, and then come. Come where? Ad senectutem, to old age. So once you get past this, it's not so difficult. Most people born today, and this is what the sentence highlights, can expect to live to about 70. Most people don't make it to 100, but it's not an outlandish idea that any given person will live that long. Back in the day, however, it wasn't that likely, especially if you lived in a city. Ancient cities chewed people up. Hygiene wasn't so good, but there were enough people for contagious diseases like bubonic plague to get around. Occasional or frequent malnourishment would weaken a person, particularly if the malnourishment took place in childhood. And the crime rate would have been out of this world. There were no lights at night. If you found yourself outside of your house after dark, well, God help you, or the gods help you. It's not that everyone was out to get you, but Rome in particular wasn't a well-laid-out city. You could easily make a wrong turn after dark, find yourself in the wrong place, and you'd be spending the night there, hoping no bandits came along. Malnourishment was particularly bad if you were a peasant in the countryside. You worked all day, wore out your bones, but you really didn't get enough to eat to sustain yourself. So, sure, there's a chance that a regular person might have a long life, but your chances were a lot better if you were an aristocrat. If you had to work for a living, well, working for a living was pretty dangerous by today's standards, regardless of your profession. So, a lot of people burned out by the time they were, well, hey, 30, let alone 40 or 50. Okay, number 11. Here's the verb. To find, come upon. It's third person plural, so we're looking for a subject. Fata. Is that feminine? That A sure looks feminine to me. But of course, well, Wheelock losses it. We're looking for a plural here, right? This NT says we're looking for a plural. We're looking for a they subject. And of course, fata is neuter plural. Get that tattooed someplace, you'll see it. Neuter plurals have an A, and they kind of look feminine, but they're not. So Wheelock glosses fatum for us as fate. And again, I think it's important to stress that when we see a word like fortuna, for instance, it's not just luck. Well, it can be luck, but there's a personification of luck, the goddess Fortuna. And of course it depends on the writer, but Fortuna was this goddess. And so are the fates. So the fates, and we forgot to ask, is this present or future? It's fourth conjugation. Well, it's future. So the fates will find, and here we have our accusative, what they're going to find. A way. The fates will find a way. Okay, we'll have a look at number 12 and call it a day. The verb here, of course, is facit, from facio, facire. Is it a present or a future? Well, this is present because we see the I here. Future would be facet. So something makes. We need a he, she, or it subject. Well, it can't be bonum virum, because that's in the accusative. But we have two possible subjects here. There's natura, that's possibly in the nominative, and the same with ordo, that's definitely in the nominative. And in fact, they're both nominative, and they're both the subject. And in effect, we have two separate clauses, and the verb serves them both. So in a way, we could do this twice, do two sentences. Bonum virum natura facit. And the second part, non ordo bonum virum facit. So the first part, nature makes the good man or a good man. The second part, rank, does not make a good man. Or here, nature makes the good man, not rank. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't know in general, but I wonder if this isn't as progressive and modern as it sounds. You remember what I said, natura is etymologically related to the word for birth. So your nature is a part of your birth. And sure, in Rome you were born with a particular rank, so maybe it's fine. But the nobility of a patrician is part of his rank, the part of his nature, which is to say these concepts, natura and ordo, nature and rank, yeah, they aren't really mutually exclusive. They aren't separate categories in the ancient world. But okay, let's leave it at that. Look at the others on your own, and see you in conferencing.